what happens to the probability of the unknown words then? Like, because when we approach unknown words, so what is the probability?
I'm saying that, we count how many times. Suppose you say, I want unknown, right? So that's a trigram. Or want unknown food, that's a trigram. Okay, so for this trigram, we would have collected statistics during the training phase.
Okay.
Okay. So once we get the statistics, unknown is also part of your trigrams.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Okay, so let us get started. I will not go over this much. So in the last class before the internet outage, we were talking about perplexity as a measure of the language model. And as we defined that perplexity is obtained from the inverse of the probability of the sentence. Okay, let me just try to find that part.
Does the model report its perplexity using the own probability it calculates, or is the probability using some testing?
You develop a model and then you evaluate it on a test set to obtain the perplexity.
Yes, got it.
Because you cannot, if you cannot find the perplexity on the training set, that will be cheating because you have already seen that. So you develop on some training set, and then when you encounter new examples on that, you can compute the perplexity. And as we have defined, in order to find the perplexity is basically comes from the probability. You want a higher probability, but you just take the inverse of it and take the nth root to normalize it, and then you say we want low perplexity. And then we also give some examples. So one of the things I want to tell you, once you have a language model like an N-gram language model, you can use it to generate new sentences or new text. For example, suppose you have a N-gram model. Based on the N-gram model, or let's say bigram model, you can generate the first word according to the distribution. That what is it, what is the probability of a word following beginning of sentence? Suppose you generate I. After you have generated I, then based on the previous two words, you generate the next word. Suppose the next word is want. Then from want you generate the next word, then to, etc. So like this, you can generate a new sentence or new text. Now, this is an experiment where you take all the works of Shakespeare, and then from the works of Shakespeare, you train unigram model, bigram model, trigram model, fourgram model, and use that to generate new text. And these are some examples from the textbook of Jurafsky and Martin of some of the text which was generated from the Shakespeare corpus using these models. And if you read this, you can find out that for trigram and quadrigram model, the text is slightly more meaningful than what you get by unigram or bigram model. Okay. And this text is also, because it has been trained only on the Shakespeare's corpus,
Ma'am, I think you have not shared your screen, ma'am.
Oh, I'm not. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are some of the text generated from a language model which was trained on Shakespeare's works. And I do not know if nowadays you read Shakespeare when you are young, but for those who have read Shakespeare, you can see that these sound like Shakespeare. Of course, for unigram and bigram model, they do not all make sense. Trigram and quadrigram model, they make a little more sense. But, so these are some statistics of the corpus. It had 884,000 tokens. The vocabulary, unique vocabulary was 29,000. And there were 300,000 bigram types, out of which V square possible bigrams were there, out of which only 300,000 were there, etc. Now, if you had trained the language model on the Wall Street Journal corpus, and then you try to generate random sentences, then the type of sentences type of text that you will get is very different from what you will get from Shakespeare's corpus. So it shows that the language model, what it can produce, depends on what it has been trained on. It is also that, if you take writings of, one of you, so suppose we take, as I can see, suppose Rishabh Tripathi. Suppose we take all the writings of Rishabh Tripathi, if Rishabh Tripathi is a prolific writer, and all writings of Rahul Chugh, and then we try to generate, then the sentences and the text will be different, because each of us has our own, unique way of writing, which we may or may not realize always. So people also can try to do authorship attribution based on the characteristics of the writings of persons. Now, there are certain hitches when you try to do language modeling. So some of the bigrams do not occur in the training data, but they appear in the test data. And if you do not account for that, then the perplexity, this is the formula for perplexity, the perplexity will come up to be 0, because when you are taking the product in the denominator, if any one term in the product is 0, the entire product will be 0 and the perplexity will become infinite. For example, suppose in your training set, these are the trigrams involving denied the allegations, denied the reports, denied the claims, denied the request. But in the test set, you may find something else. For example, you may find denied the offer, denied the loan, which have not been encountered before. And therefore, these probabilities will be 0. So, in order to counter this, we have to do something called smoothing. Smoothing is a process. There are several different ways of doing smoothing so that the probabilities become non-zero. So there are rare combinations which do not occur in the training, and therefore you want to put some probability mass on those rare combinations by taking away some probability from what you have seen, so that all probabilities are non-zero. There are various ways of doing smoothing. We will only discuss a few simple ones in class, and you can refer the textbook for some advanced smoothing methods. The simplest smoothing method is add-1 smoothing. What it does is that to every possible occurrence, it gives a small probability. It adds count of 1 to every word. So, for example, we pretend that we saw each word one more time than we did. So to each bigram count, so if you think that your vocabulary is fixed, now suppose your vocabulary is V, there should be V square bigrams, but out of that you would have encountered only few of them. As we saw in the Shakespeare corpus, the number of bigrams were much smaller than the total possible V square number of possible bigrams. Now what we do is that we add 1 to all bigram counts and V to all unigram counts. Just give an example. Suppose we want to compute the probability of Wi given Wi minus 1. And as we have defined earlier, it is obtained by taking the count of Wi minus 1 and Wi divided by count of Wi minus 1. This is the standard maximum likelihood estimate of this probability. Now, if we do add 1, what we will do is that we will add 1 to the numerator and add v to the denominator. Okay. Why we are adding 1 to the numerator and v to the denominator?
Denominator takes the contribution from each word.
Because the numerator is a bigram and the denominator is a unigram.
Yes, that's not the full answer. So what if I did not add v? What would happen? If I added did not add 0 or 1 or 2v or 3v or together, what is the problem?
Probability would become more than 1.
So we, basically we want to preserve the nature of the probability distribution. We want summation over all next word. We want that probability to be equal to 1, right? So suppose we want to say what is the next word after want. So we have want food, want lunch, want whatever. So you have so many possibilities. So for each possibility, each possible word, if you add a count of 1, because your vocabulary size is v, in order to compensate for that and make it a probability distribution, you have to add v to the denominator. Okay. Is it clear?
So v is the number, right? V, how
V
you
is the
represent
total number of words.
total number of words in the vocabulary. And
Yes.
for each
And
pair, we
because
are adding
each possible word, given that your current word is want, for each possible word, you are adding 1 to the bigram count. To compensate for that, you add v in the denominator.
right, because we are adding v times
V
1.
times. So v
times
bigrams, each of the v bigrams, we are adding 1.
Right, right.
So some of the bigrams never occurred, their count becomes 1. So a bigram which occurs 5 times, its count becomes 6. One which occurs 12 times, its count becomes 13, and so on. But because we are adding plus 1 to each of the words, so we are putting v in the denominator. Okay. So earlier, I'm not sure if I showed you, there was this Berkeley restaurant corpus, and there, so there were some zeros of those bigrams which never occurred. So after we have added 1 to the 0 entries as well as all the entries, this is that corpus. After increasing the count by 1 at every step. And after this, when we recompute the probability, we get this table. You can see the original table and the new table in the textbook and also in the slides. So these are the reconstituted counts and so on. And as you can see that this was the original, at the top table is the original raw bigram counts. After smoothing, when you compute the probability, that is shown below. Okay. So you see none of the probabilities are 0. Those whose count is 0, their probabilities are low, but they are there. Now so this is add 1 smoothing, or in general add alpha smoothing. Sometimes instead of adding 1, you may add 0.5 or 0.1. If you add 0.1 to every bigram count, what should you put in the denominator?
V by 10.
V by 10. Yes, 0.1 into V. So you put it in the denominator. So this. Okay. Now, so this was the simplest smoothing method. There are other smoothing methods, interpolation. I'll just talk about it a little bit. Then the back-off methods related to interpolation. Then there are a slightly more advanced methods like Neisser-Ney and the good Turing method. You can consult the textbook. We do not have time to talk about that. Then instead of having, these counts based on single words, you can have a higher level type of count based on groups of words, such as part of speech or clusters of words with similar meaning, etc. So these are certain things that one can do. We'll just spend a few minutes on back-off and interpolation method. Because as we saw that if we use 3 gram, 4 gram, sometimes the language becomes better. But if you are, you're encountering a phrase which is rare, then you cannot go for higher level n-grams. You should go for smaller level n-grams, right? So when you have less context, you can go for unigrams, bigrams, etc. When you have more context, you can go for 3 gram, 4 gram, 5 gram. So based on how much context you have, you can decide, what order of n-gram to go. So in the back-off means, if you have good evidence, you use higher order n-gram. If you have less evidence, you use lower order n-gram. And interpolation is a method by which you use all of them, but take a combination, right? So in order to find out the more probability distribution, you take a combination of what you would get by unigram, bigram, trigram, quadrigram, etc. So just for an example, this is a combination of unigram, bigram, trigram. So this probability of Wn, given the previous two words, you can take as a combination of trigram model, bigram model, and unigram model. And they're weighted by lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3, such that the summation of lambda I is equal to 1. And these values of lambda I, you can learn by training on your corpus to find out values of lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3, for which the overall perplexity is smaller or overall probability is higher. And based on test validation, etc., you can fix the lambdas. I'm not going into those details. But whatever, even if you use 3 gram, 4 gram, 5 gram, you only restrict it to a small value of n. So such n-gram models cannot capture long distance dependencies. Unfortunately, in natural language, there are certain constructs where long distance dependencies are important. For example, and they can be of different types, syntactic, semantic, and so on. For example, you look at this first sentence, the man next to the large oak tree near the grocery store on the corner is tall. The men next to the large oak tree near the grocery store on the counter are tall. So whether it is or are depends on the subject, which is quite far away from this particular word, right? So because the number of the verb has to match the number of the subject, whether it is singular or plural, that information may be long distance. If you look at the second set of examples, when you said the bird next to the large oak tree near the grocery store on the corner flies rapidly, if instead of the bird you had man, then the flies is not probable. So the word which comes there, if you want to take a decision, you have to look at the long distance context to understand the semantics. Right? So there are several cases of long distance dependencies which cannot be solved by taking n of a fixed number. And I will just tell that instead of looking at n-grams, one look at neural language model, which in theory can look at a longer context, arbitrary length context. And also, one can come up with representation of words which capture a lot of information. And these things we will see later in the course. Okay, so we stop this topic. And if you have any questions, we'll discuss. Otherwise, we'll go on to the next topic.
Yeah. Ma'am, just one question. I'm not still very clear on why we added 1 on the numerator and b on the denominator.
Right. We added 1 because we want to give, suppose there are 10,000 words.
Okay.
10,000 words in the vocabulary. Right? So how many possible bigrams are there theoretically?
10,000 into
10,000 square.
Correct, yeah.
But suppose you only find 40,000 unique bigrams.
Okay.
Right? Now you don't want to be get any bigram which you is 0 per count. So to all this, so B is 10,000, and you have only got 4 B bigrams. So what you are trying to do with all the possible B square bigrams, you add a count of 1. Right? So if a bigram occurs 5 times, its count becomes 6. If it occurs 0 times, its count becomes 1.
Correct.
Okay. Now suppose you are given one specific word want.
Okay.
And you want to find the probability of the next word. So in theory, any of the V words can come as the next word.
Correct.
Okay. But you have got actually only 20 of them
Correct.
in your corpus.
Correct.
So you consider you have added 1 to each of the bigrams. So you want the summation of probability of Wi given want. That summation you want it to be equal to 1.
Correct.
Right? Because that is the the definition of probability.
Correct.
Probability distribution has to sum to 1.
Correct.
Because you have added a count of 1 to each of these bigrams, in the denominator you have to put something so that the summation of these probabilities is equal to 1.
Correct.
Okay, that is why we add V to the denominator.
Okay.
Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, any other question? Okay, then I will go to my next topic, which is talking about words. Okay, can you see my slides now?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Now, so in NLP, we deal with words. We said that words are the most basic tokens that we work with. So, of course, we can also get into morphology, but let's keep aside morphology for the time being. So we look at words. Now the words, it is represented by, in a language like English or Hindi, for example, it is represented by a sequence of characters, right? And but we do not, the meaning of the word does not come from actually the meaning of the characters. It does come from the morphemes, but not from the characters as such. So each word is just, one concept or one dictionary entry which has a meaning associated with it. Okay. So, but by looking at the characters itself or the letters itself, you do not get a lot of information about the word. So we will study, lexical semantics is the linguistic study of word meaning. And in the context of natural language processing, we have to understand how we deal with words. Now, take a word such as a mouse, right? It has more than one meaning. Many of the common words are actually more than one meaning. For example, two of the common meanings of mouse are, one is a rodent, that animal. A second is the mouse that you use that controls a cursor. So the mouse is the lemma or the root form, and we say that these are two of the senses of the word mouse. Mouse as a noun. Mouse can also be a verb or an adjective, and then it can have more. So mouse is the lemma, and these are two of the senses of mouse. So a sense of concept is the meaning component of a word. Now this lemma can have multiple senses, and these words are called polysemous words. And polysemous words are very common in any natural language. Polysemous means multiple semantics, multiple meanings. Now, also there are certain relations between two words. Two words may have similar meaning, then they are called synonyms, such as couch and sofa are synonyms, big and large are synonyms, automobile and car, vomit and throw up water and H2O, they are synonyms. But of course, they are not perfect synonyms always, right? So you cannot always substitute big for large. They have subtle difference in meaning or context or the culture where it is used, etc. There are subtle differences, but overall we can say they are synonyms. Then there are words which are not synonyms, but they're similar in some way, such as cat and dog, car and bicycle, cow and horse. They have some sort of similarity because they share certain elements of the meaning, right? So car and book, they are not at all related, but car and bicycle have some similarity. Cat and dog have some similarity. But when we look at words as individual entities, whether two words are some more similar or less similar, we do not consider that. Then words can be antonyms of each other. Antonyms are words which are similar, but they mean opposite, like dark and light, short and long, fast and slow. Also, words have affective meanings or connotations. For example, there are positive connotations like happy, negative connotations like sad. Then connotations can be subtle. For example, copy, replica, reproduction, versus fake, knockoff, forgery. So fake and copy can have similar meaning in some sense, but their connotations may be very different. In one sense, it is a positive connotation. In the other sense, they are negative. Also, there are sentiments. For example, positive evaluation, great, love. The negative evaluation like terrible, hate, etc. Now, with this little bit of introduction, let us look at how we can represent words when we do natural language processing. Right? So we can say that, these are V words, and we say W1 is the first word in the dictionary, W2 the second word in the dictionary, WB, WN. So we can represent each word as a unique element, and they are not at all related. But if we do that, we do not get the sense of how these words are related. It does not capture. So we want to come up with a representation of word which captures certain elements of the semantics of the word. And that is why we look at vector semantics or embedding. And this is an extremely powerful idea and has a very important role in natural language. Now, so we want to look at a theory of how to represent the word meaning. So vector semantics is a standard way to represent word meaning for natural language processing. So this helps us to model many aspects of the word meaning. Now, for example, this is a quotation from Wittgenstein, the philosopher. The meaning of a word is its use in the language. How do we get the meaning of the word? One way of getting the meaning of the word is to consult a dictionary if it is there. From the dictionary, we can find the meaning of the word. But actually, the idea is that we can get the meaning of the word. Everyone doesn't look into a dictionary. There are people who have never seen a dictionary, who cannot even read. And they're perfectly capable of conversing in their mother tongue, right? So how do they know the meaning of the word? They know the meaning of the word based on how the word is used. Now, the same idea we can apply to a computer to derive the meaning of it. Instead of a classical way of NLP is to make a compilation of all possible senses and find the words which belong to a particular sense, right? But then those senses also you have to find what is the meaning, how do we ground it, etc. So this is not an easy process. So one of the great progress came in NLP by trying to get the meaning from the context of usage of the word and use that representation to represent. And for this, we come up with a vector representation of the word. And this representation, the first simplest representation that we will talk about today, is word-to-vec representation, where each word is represented by a vector of certain size, let us say 100 or 200. And each element in this vector is a real number, or floating point number. So this is a continuous representation. Instead of saying there are 100,000 words or 40,000 words, we have a vector, let us say of size 100, and each of these, each of these elements in this vector can take a real. Then we potentially can have a large number of vectors. We can represent different shades of meaning by such representation, which is called a dense representation. But let us come, before we discuss about that, let us come to this hypothesis, which is called the distributional hypothesis, which is similar to what Wittgenstein said, but this is a quotation by Firth in 1957. You shall know a word by the company it is. That is, from the context, you can know the meaning. So if you want to understand the meaning of the word banking, for example, in your corpus, you look at all the different contexts in which the word banking has appeared, and from that, you can get a sense of the word banking. Do you agree? Do you agree that you can find the meaning of a word based on its usage only and not by told the dictionary meaning?
Yes, ma'am.
Somewhat, not always. If it
So
is an
when you
object
say
or an
somewhat,
activity,
so when you
yeah.
say somewhat, is it that for every word that you use
No.
today or know today, have you looked at the dictionary or teacher has told you the meaning on some day?
I mean, in real world, I mean, yeah, definitely we first go with
I'm
the
asking about
someone
real
has
life
told.
you. I'm asking about the real life you. Today, your vocabulary may contain, maybe 50,000, 100,000 words. For each of the word, did you consult the dictionary or your teacher or mother or
No,
father
no, no.
told you the meaning?
Not each of the word. Not each of the word.
So today, I'm sure that this year you have encountered some new words. Did you go and find out their meaning in the dictionary?
Yeah, for new word, yes, sometimes.
Always. So you are
No,
very
not
active.
always.
So many of us do not go to the dictionary nowadays.
And Google search, if not dictionary, just Google search and all. I mean, but we try to get like more meaning or applications.
Right. So when you say, I Googled the word. So how did you know the word meaning of the word Googled?
Right, from the morphology itself, right? I mean, so Google becomes like a simple past, so that is, and then we apply our brain. So this is like came from Google, and now it became a verb, Googling or
So
Googled,
that
right?
is your experience. So
Right,
someone
right.
else can tell their experience. What is your take on this?
I think, I mean, a whole language can be learned without looking at a dictionary. I mean, when we were young, we learned the mother tongue using, using the context only, right? Every word we learned using the context. So
I
I don't
give
think there is.
you an example. So one of the woman who works in my house, she is completely illiterate, but she can use her language, flawlessly. Right?
Yeah.
And she has never seen a dictionary. Obviously, she cannot read a dictionary. And all her family is illiterate. Anyway, so let's also, but basically what we are trying to say that the context tells you a lot about the word. Now there are two things. So we can define the meaning of a word by its context of use. Secondly, we want to represent word by a vector, which means it is a point in an n-dimensional space. So if my vector dimension is 100, we say each word is a point in this 100-dimensional space. And we can visualize the words. And we can see which words are closer in this space, which words are more far away. So, and similar words, the way these vectors will come about is that we expect that the words which are similar will be somewhat closer with respect to some metric in this space. And this space and this vector representation can be built automatically without using a dictionary or WordNet, etc., by simply looking at the usage. Right? So this is an example of some words plotted in a two-dimensional space. Of course, 2 is a very small number, but if you look at, you can see, this red versus green. So you can see some of them are positive, some are negative, the blue are the function words and so on. So they are different words, but they share, the words which are close together share some aspects of the meaning in these two dimensions. So just to take a step backwards, if you want to be able to represent a text, either words or sentences or any piece of text, we could use the dictionary, or there is a very famous resource called the WordNet, which was developed in Princeton to start with. And now we have WordNets of multiple languages, which arrange words based on their meanings, or based on the SIN concepts. And they have the SIN sets, and they have the words which mean the same thing are put in against the same SIN set. And they have relations between the SIN sets, like the antonymy relation, whether something is generalization or specialization. They are called hypernym and hyponym, then meronym, that is part of. So such relationships. We'll not talk in detail about this, but you might like to study it sometime. So using this WordNet, you can come up with the concept ID as a representation of a word, but then still it becomes difficult. You can capture some relationships which are there in WordNet, but you cannot capture the subtle differences between words and similarities between them. A second way of representing words is to find out co-occurrences from the corpus. So you find out whether two words occur side by side or occur in the same sentence. Based on that, you can compute a matrix of co-occurrence counts, like the bigram counts I showed you, bigram matrix I showed you. We can have this bigram sort of matrices, or you can have semantic co-occurrence, that is occur in the same sentence, and you can get a big matrix. And using singular value decomposition of this matrix, you can come up with representation of words as a vector. Now, this is also quite good, but there are certain drawbacks. This matrix is very large because it is size b square, so it requires large space to store. And it does not consider, if you want to look at semantic similarity of word, you look at whether two words occur in the same sentence or same paragraph. But then you do not preserve the syntax of the position of the words. If you look at only the syntax, you do not preserve the semantics, so there are certain difficulties. So, yeah, we'll go back to this later. So we will discuss a very effective and simple method of coming up with a representation of words as short, dense vectors. Short means in comparison to the vocabulary. Vocabulary size may be 40,000, 100,000, 400,000. Compared to that, these vectors will be of size 100, 200, 300, etc. And these vectors are dense in the sense that the entries in the vector are not 0, 1, 2, etc., but real numbers. There are also others, so we will talk about the simplest such method, which is called word-to-vec methods, and there are two variations of that, skipgram and CBOW. There are also other methods based on global co-occurrence, such as GloVe, and then methods based on SVD, which I just told you, but not discussed in detail, will not discuss in detail. And then there are embeddings, so this word-to-vec or SVD, which we will discuss, where every word is given a unique vector. But There are other modern methods where the representation of a word depends on the context in which the word is used in that sentence. And there are various famous contextual embedding which lead to state-of-the-art NLP methods such as Elmo, BART, etc. And we will talk about them later in the course. Any questions?
Ma'am, like, how is the vector telling anything about the context in which the word is used?
Let me tell you the algorithm first and then we will discuss. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
So these are some references of the original papers. Word2Vec was by Mikolov's paper in 2014. Then there's a glove, you can also find out from this link, but I will only talk about Word2Vec in this class. So let us see how Word2Vec works. There are two variations of Word2Vec as proposed in the paper. One is called the CBOW and the other is called skipgram. So let us see how they define these vectors. Now, it is inspired by this distributional hypothesis. So what they do is that they take a corpus, and in the corpus, suppose you want to find out the representation of this word. So you say that the context, these two words in the context, they will define the meaning of this word. Or you can take a larger context of the previous two words and the next two words, or previous three words and the next three words. The idea is to say that the context, if you take the context of the word, you can predict the central word. Right? This is similar to what we have discussed in n-gram modeling. We said from the previous n-1 word, we predict the next word. Here we are saying we take the previous words and the following words and we try to predict the middle word. Okay. Now we set this up as a machine learning task where given the representation, so we will come up with for every word we'll come up with a vector representation. Given the vector representation of the words in the left context and the words in the right context, we want to come up with the vector definition of the vector representation of the word in the center. Okay. So this is based on this, we get the CBOW model. An alternative model is the skipgram model, where from the central word or the representation of the central word, we want to get the words on its left and the words on its right. Or we can define a specific context window and we can get the words in the context window. Okay. So does this formulation make sense to you?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is the formulation that we do. And then we use machine learning and a very simple form of neural network or other logistic.
Excuse me, when can you just repeat this part? I got confused.
Yeah.
Please just repeat. Can you just repeat this?
So what I'm saying is that we can set up a machine learning task. Suppose I have a corpus which has 1 million words. Okay. Now for each of the words, each of these 1 million tokens, I can say, in order to predict this token, I see the tokens in its context. Right? And we can get 1 million such examples. And from these examples, we want to find out a representation for each of the words.
And how you're representing context here, ma'am?
Because from the context words, I am getting the central word.
No. Why I understood. I'm saying how. I mean, so
that is what we are going to learn. We are going to use machine learning to learn the representation of words so that from the representation of the context word, we can get the representation of the current word. So the current word vector comes from is a composition of the vectors of the words in the context. Okay. in the Seebaugh model. In the skipgram model, given the center word and its vector, you can compute the vector of the words in its context. So if we proceed, it will become a little clearer. Suppose you take this phrase, the cat sat on floor. You know, the grammar is not good, but let's proceed with it. So sat is the, suppose we want to look at sat. So we say the context is the cat on floor, right? These are the 4 words in the context, and we have a representation for the, a vector representation for the, a vector representation for cat, that of on and that of floor. So we can sum the vectors. We can sum these vectors, and from that we can try to derive the word sat. How we will see? So on the other hand, in the skipgram model, we take the vector of the central word, the current vector that we have, and we try to predict the vectors of the context word. So for subsequent discussion, we will only look at the skipgram model. The other model is similar, but we will only explain with respect to the skipgram model. Now in the skipgram model, we are saying that from the central word, we want to predict the context words. We can simplify the problem saying that we want to predict these 4 context words. We do not really care about in which order they are occurring. The other way of saying this is that if my total vocabulary is V, so out of this V words, only 4 of the words are correct context words, and the remaining V minus 4 words are negative context words. They should not be in the context, and the 4 should be in the context. Okay. For example, if you look at this word representation, the context words are levels of, from, data, right? And all other words other than these 4 words are negative example. Is it okay? So from the, yeah.
Isn't it more natural to predict a word from the context? Predicting context from the word is a harder task, right?
All of them are actually natural. You know, from the context also you can go to the other words. From the other words you can go to the context. Both the models are there, and they have similar effectivity. When you have less data or more data, I forgot. One of them is a little better than the other. Both are possible. Okay. And both are very effective, let me tell you. That is what people have found from empirical experience. Right? So have you understood this formulation? That you want to, given representation, you want to predict levels of from data as positive and all others as negative.
Yes.
So for Word2Vec, for the original Seebaugh, for Seebaugh, we give the context. Suppose we get a context of 1 to the left, 1 to the right, just for simplicity in this slide. So we have this word cat, this word on, and we want this word sat. So we want to say that sat is what we should get as positive and everything else as negative. Okay. Now, originally, before we come to the vector representation, how is cat represented? So cat is one of the V words in my vocabulary, in my dictionary. So I can say that cat is the 2nd word in my dictionary. On is the 4th word in my dictionary. And the sat is the 7th word in my dictionary, right? So this is originally, before we have learned any representation, we have what we call an one-hot representation. So one-hot representation. So if my vocabulary size is V, So the one-hot representation is an array of size V in which only one position is 1 and the rest are 0. Okay. This is a sparse representation but large, sparse large vector. So before we know anything about the word, we can start with a one-hot representation of each word. And we want to compute finally the index, the particular word which we want to put here. Yeah.
And so in this one-hot vector, like the size of this would be the number of words and all.
Size would be the total number of unique words in the corpus.
Okay.
Okay. Now, we use something called, which is a very simple version of a neural network, rather a linear model, where we say that we have a hidden layer. We'll talk about neural network a little bit later in this class. So we have a neural network, a hidden layer of size n, where n is much smaller than v, right? Typically a few hundred. Okay, and we learn a weight matrix of size v cross n. That is, for each of the v elements here is connected to each of the n elements here. So we get a v cross n matrix. Okay, and if I want to compute the ith element given the word cat, what do I get? Because everything else is 0 except the second entry, the only contribution from cat will come from this second entry, and it will be those weights corresponding to the second column. Okay, so they will be summed and will come here. Similarly, for on, only the fourth entry is 1 and the remaining is 0. So that will come here. So let me show you. So we have this matrix WV cross n, the transpose of this matrix, and we multiply it with the one-hot representation of cat. So then I will get here a vector corresponding to cat. Similarly, when I do this, multiply with x on, then I get vector corresponding to on. And this we can sum up here. We can put the sum here. And then we can take the average of this. We can either take the sum or the average of this as the representation in this hidden layer. So this will be clear. This is my matrix V cross N, right? Transpose of that. So each column corresponds to a vocabulary entry. So for cat, we use the second column. For on, we use the fourth column, and so on, right? So when we multiply this W matrix with the X cat, we get the second column of this matrix. And for on, we get the fourth column. And then we sum these two up and get their average. Is it clear?
Can you tell a little bit about the W matrix? Like, what is the N?
So W matrix, V is the number of words, total number of words. N is the dimension of the vector, hidden vector. And that is the desired size of the word representation. I told you that we want to represent a word by a short, dense matrix. So N is the size of the vector with which we want to represent a word.
So what is the typical size of N? Like,
as I said, 100, 200, 300, 50. That is the typical size.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be more sensible to like use the concatenation of the two vectors because that way we can also capture the
If you take the
sequence in which they were
concatenation,
offered.
the size will become larger. I get what you are saying. You are saying that if I take the concatenation, I can maintain the order in which these words occur, right?
Yes, yes.
But it turns out that even after forgetting the order, you still get good result.
Okay.
And in fact, you get much more training data which gives you good vectors. What you are saying is possible. But what I am showing is what people practically. Yeah.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask that why we take the same weight for the both the words.
We are not taking the same weight. Each word has a unique entry in the dictionary vocabulary.
Achha, so means, okay, so means each column is for a.
Each column is one word.
Okay.
If there are 1 million words, there will be 1 million columns.
Okay, okay, okay. Yes.
Okay. And this column, that is the representation of the word. Actually, this W matrix is what we are going to learn, right? And the W matrix, the ith column will give you the representation of the ith word. And each word will have a different column and a different representation.
Ma'am, and as we learn, is it necessary that the vector representation, it is not necessary, right, that they will remain in one hot vector form? So
they will not remain this. They are, dense representation.
Yes, so then while learning, we will give.
If my size is 9, if I represent 1 hot, I can only represent n words. I want to be able to represent a huge amount of words, in potentially infinite senses. Right? So we have a dense representation.
Yes, and I'm saying that as we keep learning these vectors, they will be used again to predict the center word.
Yeah, I will not come to that. Yeah, I will come to that. We have just showed how to compute this internal thing, and then we will see from this internal thing how do we come here. Okay. So for that, so there are two matrices. One is this W, and for this part there will be another weight matrix, which is n cross V. Okay. So that was about the getting the representation for cat. Then this is getting the representation for on, and then we take the average. And then we have a second matrix, W prime, which is also V cross N. And this V hat which we have got, we multiply W prime with V hat to get Z. So Z is the vector that we get here. Okay. But Z is not a one-hot vector, not necessarily. Z is a vector where there will be 0.01, 0.517. So it will have different score, different values in the different entries. Okay. Is this okay? Now, this is typically what we get after we multiply W hat V cross N with V hat, we get Z. So Z is some arbitrary values, vector with some arbitrary values. Now, we want to normalize Z so that Z, each entry of Z can be interpreted as probability of the corresponding word. So we want that this entry is 1. Therefore, our expectation is that when we convert this Z to probability values, at this position, the probability value will be high. Best is to have 1, and the rest of the position, the probability will be 0, ideally. But we actually want high value of probability at this position and very low values at the other position. But we want a mechanism to convert arbitrary scores to these probability values. Okay, and for this, what we do is that we use a concept of softmax, which I will tell you. So, just to go back, this matrix W, the first matrix W, V cross N transpose, that, as I told you, the columns of this matrix we interpret as the word vectors. So ith column as the vector of the ith word. And we have a second matrix W prime. Right? So we only take one of the matrices and take its column. You could have also considered that for W prime, but conventionally people only look at the columns of W. But in theory, you could have taken the relevant columns of W prime or take an average of both.
Ma'am, do we use only one hidden layer or?
A single hidden layer. There is a very simple thing. This is a single hidden layer where we just use, it's a linear network, which is a very simple network. This is just weighted sum. This is just this matrix multiplication to this layer followed by another matrix multiplication to get the final layer, which we normalize. That's it. Okay. So this is a very simple model. Let us discuss the skip-gram model. In skip-gram model, as we have told, we take the one word as input, and this is the one-hot vector of that word. And then there's my hidden layer containing, it's an n-element hidden layer. And we again have a matrix W1, which is V cross N, which connects this input to the hidden layer. And we have a second matrix W2. There we are calling it WW prime. Here we are calling it WY W2. Same thing. W2 is N cross V. Okay. And here we will get some score. And as I said, we normalize the score so that the sum of these scores will become 1. And we normalize by doing this measure. So suppose the scores are 1.52, right? We want to convert it into values. So we will say e to the power 1 divided by e to the power 1 plus e to the power 0.5 plus e square. So we will do this at all the entries so that we can get the values here which sum to 1 and which can be interpreted as the probability of the output being that word. So in skip-gram, as we told you, that given the central word, we want to find the context word. Suppose there are 4 context words. We want that these 4 context words will have high probability at those corresponding positions, and the rest of the positions we will have low probability. Oh, I'm sorry, we are quite late. I must stop here. Okay? I didn't realize we are past time. We'll continue in the